Right.
Whoa,
Yo!
hey.
All right. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Timeless Gamer, the official weekend podcast of the Pinoy Retro Gaming Network. My name is Joel Baklit, and I will be your host for this show. We have a very special episode today featuring a very special guest. As such, we will not be doing our usual format of talking about the games we've been playing lately. Instead, we'll be going straight into our interview portion. Joining me for this interview will be my cohorts and timeless gamers, starting with Joe RPG. A little bit of an
Hi,
introduction.
guys. What's up? What's up?
There you go. And next we have Shin Mamochu.
Hello, good morning, and good evening to everybody, and belated Happy Thanksgiving for everyone.
All right, excellent. And last but not least, definitely we have J Prime.
Good evening, good morning, good day, everybody. Happy
Excellent.
Thanksgiving, happy Black Friday.
All right, so first things first, actually, now let's get right down to it. Let me introduce our very special guest. You might not have heard of his name very much lately, but you will be very familiar with his works if you are any kind of retro gaming fan or an Atari fan. He's the man who developed such amazing games like the very first film to home video game translation ever, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Also, one of the Atari's biggest hits, Yar's Revenge. He also programmed what was wrongfully derided as the worst game of all time, E.T. for Atari 2600. I personally think that's not true. Well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Howard Scott Warshaw.
Yay!
Woo!
Such an honor, such a deep
All
honor.
right.
Hello. The
Excellent.
honor is mine. Thank you, Joel.
All right. Thank you very much for being on our show, Howard. Let's begin first by having a little bit of an introduction for yourself. Yeah, having a little bit of a self introduction to the viewers that we have right now who are weaned on video games such as Mobile Legends and Fortnite. Let's have a little bit of an introduction from Mr. Howard Scott Warshaw himself.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So I just want to say that before there was Fortnite, before was Halo, before there was any of this, video games had to be born at some point. And that's where I came in. I was one of the pioneers at the beginning of video games, trying to define the standards to refine now. And that was an amazing time of life. It was an amazing time in the industry. And I've never forgotten my experiences and the joy and the excitement that I felt at Atari launching a brand new medium, the medium of interactive entertainment. So, as Joel said, my name is Howard Scott Warshaw. I did Yar's Revenge, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., and Abitur, a game that is starting to get some attention now because it's being re-released. Interestingly, I have some records, and I have the shortest game development of all time with E.T., which was done in 5 weeks and then released. I also have one of the longest developments because my game Saboteur was done at Atari but was not released then and is being released now some nearly 40 years later. So I have the fastest and the slowest development of all time on the 2600. And I have held it. I'm sure we can get to some talk, but thank you very much for having me. I'm just a guy who started in the games, took a long turn around through filmmaking, through all kinds of adventures and things out of technology. And now I've landed as the Silicon Valley therapist. I am actually a psychotherapist now. So I used to, and I specialize in working with nerds, right? With nerds, geeks, and all kinds of hype people. And so
Bless your soul,
the way
sir.
I look
Bless your
at it
soul.
is I came full circle, right? Oh, thank you. The way I look at it is make games to entertain nerds, but now I actually work to make their lives better. And I'm very honored and proud to do that work. And but as a writer, I have ventured into a number of things, and sure we'll talk about this book, Once Upon Atari, which is how I made history by killing an industry, which is The book that I wrote that's all about what it was like being there at the beginning of the industry, what happened to the crash of '83, what it's like to work in video gaming then and now, and The Arc of My Life, which has many degrees.
Right now, we are showing a little bit of a preview of Howard's website, Once Upon Atari. If you guys are interested, please check out his website, onceuponatari.com. No spaces, no dashes, no nothing. You write it out the way it is, and you get to his website. There's tons of amazing material in there. And you can also have a look at some merchandise that you can purchase from him, like his documentary and his book, like he mentioned. So let us begin this conversation by asking um, Howard a little bit. Oh, speaking. Let's just flash that a little bit. Yeah, he does have a DVD documentary about how things were back in the day and
I
interviews
would
with very
love
influential
that.
people.
Oh, here it was.
Right there, Once Upon Atari, the documentary.
This was
Ec-
actually became a video producer to make this documentary, and the only piece of media ever produced that is done entirely by people who worked in the VCS department at Atari making 2600 games. So this is exclusively the word from people who were actually there doing it. So that's
Mhm. Rather than getting secondhand information, this is from the mouth of the act from the mouths of the actual people who were there in the trenches. There you go. All right, so let's begin by asking
right. It's not
Howard.
only from the horse's mouth; it's the entire stable.
Sorry about that. I apologize for that, Howard. Let's begin by asking Howard. The very first question. Uh, let's start at the very beginning. As has been said in the Sound of Music, it's a very good place to start. Um, as a young programmer, tell us a little bit about your life in the early days and how it led to your being how it led to your working in Atari.
Well, it's interesting because Atari was the last place I figured I'd wind up. I went virtually everywhere else first. I wasn't even going to go into computers until I was originally working at university. I was going to school studying economics and math, and I'd never had a computer course. And one of my advisors told me, you've got to have computers if you're going to go anywhere in economics. I took one computer course and I was sold. And so from the moment I took my first computer course, about 2.5 years later, I had a master's degree in it because I just was totally taken by computers. It was the most amazing thing because you didn't have to read books, you didn't have to do papers or solve puzzles, and it was just a great, fun way to go to school. So I totally dove into computers. I came to work at Hewlett Packard in California,
Oh,
and
HP.
all that I had found in computing. Absolutely. I was a humper pumper, as they say at HP. And uh, all the joy and exhilaration and excitement that I had found at in computing disappeared when I started doing commercial programming on a scale at Hewlett Packard, and I was incredibly impressed. And I didn't know what to do. I was out of a zoo case at HP because you wouldn't know what to talk to me, but I'm quite a large personality, and I don't always fit in subtle corporate environments. And so a friend of mine who worked there said, "Hey, the kind of acting out that I would do, the kind of shenanigans that I would pull at HP." He said, where my wife works, they do that kind of stuff all the time. I said, "Oh, where's that?" He goes, "Atari." Now, that was the
Ah,
first time I heard of Atari as a place to work. And so I went and interviewed there, pushed my way in. I talked my way into an interview, went through a whole interview process, and then they rejected me. So
Really?
I didn't
Didn't know
accept
even knew
that.
that.
I did not accept. Yeah, uh, I was rejected by Atari initially, and I just called up the hiring manager and I just started talking with him, begged him and pleaded and did everything. And I ended up, I negotiated a 20% cut in pay to go and to be on probation to get into Atari. I knew that was a place I needed, and I wanted to give me a chance and that turned out one of in Atari history. The idea that I was initially rejected.
Hmm. Okay, excellent. So let's see. In your time, that was around 19. Was that 1980 around that time, if I remember correctly from the book?
That's around late 1980. I arrive at Atari at the very beginning of '81.
1981. For those of you in the audience, that is, yeah, close to 40 years ago, you guys. We are, we're talking about the foundations of the video gaming industry as it is right now. And Howard was there to actually witness Atari and its during its prime. Which brings me to the second question. Does anybody want to ask this one, or should I pitch it to Howard first?
I say you should go. You go ahead first,
All
Chris
right.
Joel, and then
Actually,
I'll
yeah.
come through next.
I'm a huge technology history guy, and I love the idea of meeting, like I said, the pillars of the industry, the ones who are foundational to how things are nowadays. Let me ask you. From what I read in your book, you came in during the tenure of Ray Kassar, if I read that correctly, right, Howard?
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
The question is, did you ever meet the actual founder of Atari, Nolan Bushnell?
I did. I didn't meet him much while I was at Atari, except for the very end of my Atari reign. But I have run into Nolan many times over the years. We're actually pretty good friends, and we did have some fun around the making of the movie Atari Game Over, which we're both in. But Nolan's an
Yes.
amazing guy. But I didn't meet Nolan directly right away. But what I did meet was Nolan's culture. Because when I arrived at Atari, it was at a very critical time. And I go into this at length in the book, the idea of the cultural shift that went on at Atari from Nolan Bushnell, which was the kind of culture everybody who's into tech gaming dreams of, because it was a super creative environment where engineers and the creative people had trained to do whatever they, as long as they generate and then had to be cool product at that. And that was replaced by Warner and Ray Kazar, which was more of a money focused, marketing oriented mentality. And both of them are fine. Both of them have their place. But at Atari, initially, it was all creativity. And then it turned into all money, and the creativity kind of got quashed because nobody really knew how to blend these two. Technotainment, which is what Atari kind of launched, was a new thing. Nobody really knew how to do, and we were blazing new trail. Now, I was someone who happened to come from an background who also picked up technology. So I was someone who was uniquely suited to see both sides of the fence. Whereas most of the engineers were just like, get out here, we just want to do our creative product. Most engineers were, hey, just give us something and stop holding it back. We want it better to put it out so we can sell it. And there was a lot of conflict there. And I was one person who kind of walked both sides of the fence. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because actually, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners recognize if they're working in tech, the battle between engineering and marketing started at Atari, but continues to this day.
It does.
And it's just amazing clash of iconic personalities and egos all the time. And it's because I'm also a psychotherapist, so I look at this from that point of view, and I think some very interesting.
Oh, I think the signal might have caught a little bit.
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties, I
Yeah,
think, on
technical
Howard's end.
difficulties, Howard. But yes, could you repeat that last portion for us, please?
I think we've got a lag thing going on here.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit of a
there is a
lag. But
delay. Actually, from both sides.
The part about the
So
lag, or the part about marketing
Yeah,
and engineering.
the little ending part about how in the end marketing and engineering are from the psychotherapist's point of view. You you caught on that side.
Absolutely. Yeah. What's therapist is that in the engineering community, you have some really brilliant and creative minds, and it's very interesting people to deal with. And in the marketing department, you also have some brilliant and creative people. And the one thing you have in common with everybody in this is ego. There's a tremendous amount of ego involved in
Ego,
people who
yes.
are trying to really make a mark, to really do big things in the industry. So the clash between the two of them, intense. It's intense because it's in a lot of ways unnecessary. We should be working together, right? There's
That is
a
very true.
joke. There's an old joke in academia that says, academics so various? And the answer is because they, and so you can have really brutal politics among people in small stakes environments. In high tech, there are large stakes environments because millions and sometimes billions of dollars are on the line. Everybody wants a part of it, and everybody wants to be responsible for having created it and generated it. And it just creates these brutal infighting scenarios that, like I say, as an engineer, it's really hard to take. As a marketer, it's extremely frustrating.
All right. Wow. And like Howard says, it's like one of those things that you can see from his experience that happened before, and it continues to this very day. It reminds me of a line from the movie Gladiator by Ridley Scott. The things you do today echo in eternity, and it's like something that happened before still happens today. Some would say it's a never-ending cycle. Um, moving moving forward, though, let's continue with the next question. Mamuchu has a question for you, Howard.
Yeah, because I was just like wondering in regards to like because we did kind of delve in with Josh.
Oh,
Oh, it looks like he's caught in a little bit of a lag situation there too. But yes,
I mean,
sorry, Mamuchu.
Um, yeah,
Again, I think you got caught in a
yeah,
little bit of lag.
yeah,
Please repeat the question.
yeah. Sorry, my internet is acting a little bit weird, so
A
sorry
little
about that,
spotty,
guys.
but that's all
Yeah,
right.
you guys were actually already mentioning about Nolan Bushnell earlier, and then like your time in Atari. I was like wondering, like in regards to the yeah, I think I'm still lagging right now.
No, you're
no,
still
no,
good.
you're fine.
Keep going, Mamuchu.
I think you're okay.
I
Yeah,
think you're
we're
okay.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was like wondering, like, in regards to the culture in Atari, is it competitive? Is it fun? I mean, what's the the all around environment in Atari?
That's breaking up.
Okay. I think Howard got caught in a little bit of lag there as well. Let's wait until he comes back
Yeah,
fully. There you go. I think Mamuchu's question was, how was Atari's
Not really
culture
hearing the
during the
question.
time that you were there? And
Yeah.
you mentioned that in Nolan Bushnell's Atari, it was very much fun, and transitioning into Reika Sar's culture, it was different. How was it? How was it actually, Howard?
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, Howard, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, excellent. Uh, Mamuchu's question was regarding your time in Atari. You kind of touched on this about how you came during the cusp at the very end of Nolan Bushnell's time going into Reka SARS, and Nolan's approach was very much fun oriented, creative, and going to Reka SAR's time, it was a little different. Just tell us a little bit about how that transition happened, what the culture was back then.
Oh, okay, yeah, it was extremely different. It was a different focus, and I want to accentuate the idea that I don't know if it's about right or wrong. It's about different. But that change was shocking, particularly to creative people,
Hmm.
because the change was when a creative only, which Nolan's world was about producing fun. It was just about producing fun. Ever you to make something fun, creating profits, and you did whatever you could to maximize profits as they saw it. Now, some people, typically in engineering, the way people think is the way we maximize profits is by making a better product. And in marketing, the way people tend to think is the way we maximize profits is a marketing window with advertising and promotion and hitting that window with product and not missing it. And the quality of the product isn't as important as pumping things through the window. And the thing is, they're both valid approaches, but they're directly in conflict. And when you have that kind of conflict, as you can well imagine, each person thinks they're the one who's right and the other one is wrong. And that was the root of tremendous conflict there. And because each side feels the other is compromising their vision, their ideals. So, and the real key to looking at all this is that Nolan was in charge. Engineers decided when a game was ready. You know, the idea of who decides is ready. When is it ready to go out and ship? During the Nolan regime, engineering decided when a product was ready, and then they'd hand it over to marketing, and marketing would put it out and promote it and support it. During Ray's regime, that power to decide when a product was done, when a game is ready to go out, shifted from engineering to marketing. So now it was more in charge of what games were going to be done and what the schedules were. That's how we wound up with 5 weeks for ET. Engineers put together the idea of doing a game in 5 weeks. In fact, and I go into this in the book, there's when they negotiated the deal for the ET, they called up my boss's boss, the guy who was the head of VCS engineering, and said, "Hey, we need ET for September 1st. This is late July." He goes, "We have about 5 weeks." He goes, "We need ET. Can you give us a game?" And he said, "No, just can't do it in 5 weeks. Can't be done." For that, Ray Kazar, because I knew Ray. Ray and I had a few dealings together that were kind of amusing, at least for me. And he
We
still
know
called me
why.
up directly and said, "Hey, can you do it? Will you do it?" And I told him, "Absolutely, I will do it, provided we reach the right arrangement." And that was the beginning of ET.
Hmm.
But it was the idea that you could even think of trying to do games typically took 6 to 8 months to do at that time. So in engineering, the idea of even trying to do a game in weeks was ridiculous. Of course, because it was ridiculous, the idea appealed to me tremendously because I love a challenge. Even if it's a ridiculous, absurd challenge, I really felt up to it and I really wanted to try it. And I did ET. And I don't feel bad about the fact that a lot of people call ET the worst game or the worst game ever done. The truth is, I actually prefer when people do identify ET as the worst game of all time, because I also did Yar's Revenge, which is frequently considered by many to be one of the best. So as long as ET is the worst game of all time, greatest range of any game design.
All right, excellent. Um, we have here. Let me just forward you to my colleague here, Jay. Actually, Jay Prime did a stream recently
Yes.
of your games. Actually,
Yes.
Howard, he did a stream most recently. I think this was just this past Thursday.
Yes.
Jay is considered one of the youngest members of Pinoy Retro Gaming, and I gave him a challenge to play through some of your games. Yar's Revenge. He did a little bit of Saboteur. Actually, he played Saboteur, and he played ET. Now, I want Jay to give a little bit of feedback. Noel, maybe like his opinion on how fun your games were. But
All
Jay,
Okay.
right.
Okay, I'll give my honest opinion because we all deserve to hear it. How it's just 100% raw. So I'll begin with Yar's Revenge. I thought it was, being that I'm mostly like I started with Nintendo and so on and so forth. So I never really had a chance to play much Atari back then. So when I started with Yar's Revenge, genuinely I was confused of where to begin. Um, I saw the little whatever section it is that you can't shoot through. You can't shoot through the little yard thing, right? And then I had to figure out like I had to like get to the
And
cannon um, towards the end. So for the most part, I had quite a bit of fun with it. I was confused, but I had Joel's guidance to get me through. So far, like yeah, I actually enjoyed it. The game Saboteur, we weren't able to. I was actually trying to get Raiders of the Lost Ark to work, but for some reason I wasn't able to, so I had to move on to Saboteur. And Saboteur I actually enjoyed. Had a little bit of struggle here and there. I did appreciate the fact that there was a little Easter egg. You could see the Yar fly or whatever it was called as one of the enemies. Um, I thought that
There we
was
go.
quite enjoyable. Yes. And then I don't think I was able to
yeah, the
finish
art.
that game. Yeah, right. Yeah, I made this earlier, a little
yes, Jay
montage.
did that little animation right there to show what a little bit of what Howard's games look like.
Right.
And for our audio listeners, Howard Scott Warshaw actually did some amazing games. Some people treat his games like Yar's Revenge, and personally speaking, I played Saboteur as well as some of the very best games that were ever made. And
Mm,
he also did E.T. and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Um, Jay, you have a question about how Howard might
yes.
feel about his programming or like
Right.
his continuity, shall we say? You can
Right.
ask your question, Jay.
Okay. So I had a question for you, Howard. If things had turned out differently for ET, would you still be a developer back then, or even up until now? Would you even consider going back into game development? And if given the choice, would you redo or change anything about ET?
That's a really good. That's a good series. Uh, you know, you know what they say about any creative product is that they're never done. They're just abandoned, which
Right.
means there's always I would go back and change and shift. In fact, for ET, I have a in my book about the things that I would change, even for schedules. If I had one extra day, the thing, one week, the I would a couple of months, what I would change. So those were all. I've addressed that pretty extensively. Yeah, there's definitely things I would shift. As to whether I would have stayed in games, if there was a different reaction to ET, I don't know that that's the decision. I like doing different things, 5 or 6 careers so far. Because what I like to do is I like to get involved in something, really see if I can master it, make a contribution to it, and then I like to move on and learn something else and constantly grow. That's what I enjoy doing. And one of the great things about being a psychotherapist is it's one of the frustrating things about liking to do something new all the time is that every time you go into a new field, you kind of lose all the stim and all the momentum that you've built in previous careers, starting over again. And for some
Right.
people, that's exciting. And for some people, it's horribly frustrating. And some people can't bear the thought of losing the status they've achieved. So they'll never do it. I can't not do it. But the great thing about psychotherapy is it's the one kind of work that incorporates everything that I've ever done before. Because if you go to experience as a therapist, that just means there's more people you can work with, there's more people you can identify with and connect with. So all the filmmaking, writing, speaking, tech, creative production, photography, all of these things expanded the skill set that I bring to psychotherapy to work with creative types and people who, and I mean, I work with high tech leaders and the super intelligent because it's just a really, I meet amazing people. One of the great things about Atari was the idea that it was probably one of the most vibrant and stimulating groups of people I've ever worked with in my life. Because in tech, you meet a lot of smart people because you have to be pretty smart to be able to master tech in the first place. And when you're doing creative work, you meet some wacky and weird and wild people, and that's interesting also. But into technotainment, video games was one of the first time those were married and really merged, and you got to see a bunch of really smart, really weird people, and that was a lot of fun. It was just one of the most stimulating, exciting, and creative groups I've ever been involved with. I will never forget my time at Atari. That's why I had to make a video. That's why I had to write a book, is just to share what an amazing place that was. And I always feel that everywhere I go, I'm bringing some special stuff with me because of the chance I had not just launch a new type of medium, you know, of interactive entertainment, but to do it with just a wacky, weird, and just really lovable crew of wild people who were so devoted to bringing entertainment. That was very meaningful. As I wandered around the industry, I tried to find that again. In game, the games, it was just really hard to replicate. Atari was so amazingly satisfying a place to work that it ruined every place I worked at after Atari. And it was kind of depressing. And it took me 30 years before I found something to do in psychotherapy that was anywhere near approaching how and exciting work Atari. Hope-
All right, wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
I think I think we have a follow up question from Mamuchu.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Howard. Okay.
Hopefully my connection doesn't mess up this one. You were mentioning earlier that you basically have a huge camaraderie and friendship formed when you were in Atari. Now, this question is a little bit more connected to Yours Revenge. Did you basically titled Yours Revenge out of the sheer cause of that camaraderie in order to give a bit of a nod to some friends who, let's say, moved to a different greener pasture?
I think I know. And it's I what I did in naming Yara's Revenge was strategic more than it was collegial, as they say. This was more
Okay,
about
okay.
working work marketing. Okay, what you're talking, I did that when I Revenge got game, any story behind it, didn't have any name behind it, nothing until very development. I was just because my feeling was, what's the point in naming a game until you have a good game? So I kept working
Mhm.
on the game. When it got to the point where it was a pretty good game, then it was time to name it. And marketing had some horrible suggestions for names as far as I was concerned. I wanted to be
Mhm.
the one to name the game. And this is a whole story, that's a whole elaborate story in the book about how I actually arrived. I used an algorithm to arrive at the name for the game, and it worked
Oh,
into
snap.
it turned into playing back on itself into Easter eggs that I put into the game. And
Yes.
another thing I did was I wrote a story for game environment and the story. That was Nobody had ever done that before. I was actually the first one to do uh, a backstory for a video game. I wrote an entire story just to strengthen the name, to work it through marketing, and they decided
Yeah.
to turn it into an auxiliary product, a comic book, which was the first a video game ever had an auxiliary product. Yours Revenge is full of firsts. There were a lot of things that I did in Yours Revenge that became industry standards. But it was first, it had reset from the joystick, so you didn't have to go back to the base unit to do anything. It was first full explosion. It had the first marketing approved signature and Easter egg. There were just a lot of things that were groundbreaking in Yard. The sound system in Yard was pretty
Uh-huh.
groundbreaking. It was much more elaborate than anything you'd seen before, because I was there as a technician and a mathematician, right? You had to be a good programmer to be able to work the VCS, but I'm also
Mhm.
a huge film fan. And although I had a master's in computer engineering at the time and a bachelor's in math, I also had a degree in economics. I had a minor in theater. And I think that my theater
Wow.
background and my economics background contributed a lot more to what I could do with games and did my and math because you can meet a spec when you're programming. It's easy to meet a spec, but when you add something to a spec that says it has to be fun, that becomes a very hard target to hit. And so I didn't think about a game as something that takes place on the screen. I think about a game as something that's based in the player's mind. Right. So when I was programming, I wasn't really thinking about the code and trying to put stuff in registers. I was thinking, what's this going to neurons in a player's brain? And is that going to be cool? And that's the way I programmed games. And so that's why yours is so visually stimulating because I wanted something that was eye popping, that was going to capture your senses. So the ion zone is not only a very efficient, because it's actually the code from the cart,
Mhm.
which is another first in Yars Revenge. Yars Revenge is the only game I think that actually displays its code on the screen. People don't
I was about
realize it. it's and
Oh.
Yeah, I
all
was
the
about
all
to
the all
ask
the
that if that's
visuals and all the
true.
sound. It's an audio visual feast. That is
I
true.
see. Oh,
That is
snap.
absolutely true. It was actually a big argument with legal wanted to have a thing. They were saying can't put the code of copyrights. I told anybody who can actually look at that and figure out the code from that they're welcome to it because it's like a counter scrolling masked thing. It's not purely the code, but all the graphics for the Ion Zone are based on the code in the cart. And I only did that because I didn't want to use more space for graphics. Graphics eat up memory tremendously, and we didn't have much
Yes.
memory. So
Yeah.
I decided to use the code for graphics in addition to using it for the code. And it was
Mhm.
just a cool idea that really saved me a lot of time and enabled me to make yours a cooler looking game.
Damn. It's
It's
awesome.
actually it's all detailed in Howard's book, Once Upon Atari. It's a
Yes.
fascinating read. Honestly, I've read through the book. I'm planning on doing another read through before the end of the year, Howard. It's an extremely well written book. There's tons of information here, and it actually goes into great detail about how Howard developed Yar's Revenge. If the audience is at all interested, I highly recommend get the book Once Upon a Atari by Howard Scott Warshaw. Um, Jonas might have a question for Howard though. Mhm.
Yes. Before I ask my question, first of all, thank you so much for Howard Scott Warshaw for for allowing us to have him on this show. One of the highlights of the show so far. No?
Yes,
One of our
indeed.
biggest guests so far in this in the history of Timeless Gamer. And to all of you guys who are watching and listening to us live, be sure to ask some questions there. We might not have enough time to rummage all of them, but we'll try to. With
Yeah.
Howard Scott Warshaw, the one of the few things that I like um, about about the guy himself, no, uh, out of all of the years that come so far with the video game with the video game industry, his name is still quite relevant up to this day. Uh, whether you say it's because of whether it's because of Raiders of the Lost Ark or E.T., um, especially with the retro gaming community, his name is always be there, you know, and eh, at least, sir, that's your legacy to all of us, no? And personally, I'm quite interested with gaming history myself. A few things that I've watched on YouTube were some of the things regarding the video game Crash of '83, and I know you've heard about this all the time with some of the people keep asking you about this and on how you influence the whole thing. But oh, guys, one of the few things as well, no, if it's not about the book, if you don't if not about the book or documentary, there's also this movie that James Rolfe made called the Angry Video Game Movie, which Howard Scott Warshaw also co-starred. And one of the highlights of that movie was all about E.T. and their adventure going to the landfill in New Mexico, trying to find that Atari landfill, and Howard Scott Warshaw was there, um, presenting himself. So my question to Howard, so meeting James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd himself. So how was the production, and how was he on set, and how did he able to get to you in the first place?
Uh, well, first of all, thank you, Jonas. I really appreciate it. And by all means, you can just call me Howard. And so I just want to say he's a very interesting guy because the angry video game nerd character is an outrageous, outrageous character. And James Rolfe himself is actually quite a contemplative and an interesting and introspective guy. And he's a brilliant filmmaker. He really is. And he is someone who is truly dedicated to the art of filmmaking. And he's a student of film. And so I really appreciated that. And when I was on set, I was really impressed with how professional the production was. This was a full scale, high end Hollywood production. All the departments and everybody there, it was really a big undertaking. But they had a huge Kickstarter. They had one of the biggest Kickstarter fundings ever, and he earned it. He deserved it. He created a great character in the angry video game nerd, angry, and they made a one movie. But the way it first came out, this is kind of funny. I think it's funny is that because I did one of the most unusual. They sent me a script, right? They got a hold of me an email, and he sent me a script. He says, "Here, we'd like you to be in the movie because it's about ET and you, and we'd really like you to be yourself in the movie." And I thought, okay. And I read the script, and I did something that actors in history almost never ever do. Is I argued for a smaller part. I told him that because I was going to be the character that's this crazy guy who lives in a shack in the middle of the desert, is hiding out and shooting at people. And I was just becoming a psychotherapist now. I was just gotten licensed, and I was starting to start my practice. And I was thinking, I'm not sure that's really the image that I want to project for my
True.
clients. And so I negotiated with them to do a rewrite and give me a smaller part. And somebody else got another part. So some other actor got a big break, and they got a decent sized part because I didn't want to do the part that way. And, it was very cool, and they were very receptive, and they felt it actually helped out the script because it added another layer of intrigue to the whole script in the rewrite. And it was just an amazing amount of work that James Rolfe and Kevin Finn is another guy who wrote and directed, I believe. And it's just really, it's a fun movie. And I really enjoyed being a part of it. But I was really impressed with the professionalism.
Excellent. Wonderful. All
Good
right.
job.
So let me be the one to ask, the one of the biggest questions of this interview then, Howard. I know this has been discussed ad infinitum by a lot of your previous interviews regarding the about ET itself and the video game crash of 1983. I've said in the beginning of this interview that I personally don't believe that ET is the worst game of all time. I personally believe that given a little bit more time, ET would have been a masterpiece, really, and it would have sold, like crazy. And actually, I still think that people do consider it and one of the seminal games of that era. Now, my question is, well, walk us a little bit through about how you felt as ET. Well, we've heard about how you programmed ET, how it felt going from sending ET out and then hearing as it went along, all the way to the very end of the cycle, where it turned out that people expressed disappointment with it, but it's not really something that was warranted. Could you walk us a little bit about over your feelings of how that whole period happened?
That's a really interesting question, Joel. Thank you. Uh, Initially, just the idea of doing the game, I never really even thought about it. I just thought I have to, I must do this. This was a challenge I couldn't resist. So I took it on. And during the development, I didn't really think about much of anything because I couldn't think of anything except doing the game. I really turned my life off and devoted it 110% to doing the game. I even had a development system moved into my home, so I would never be more than a couple of minutes away from a keyboard unless I was driving between work and home. And when the game was done, to remember, this is way pre-internet, right? There was no internet back then, which means we didn't just drop the game and then have a bunch of feedback right away, be able to see and then be able to drop a mod for the game and things like that. It was one shot. We're going to manufacture it, put it out there, and there's a huge lag between when you finish the game. Like I finished the game by September 1st. It didn't hit shelves until like 2.5 months later.
Mm-hmm.
So for all that time, it was just like, hooray, I finished the game, and it felt great, and everybody was excited because we had an ET product. What I told you is that marketing wasn't as concerned with the quality of product as they were with hitting the window, and I had enabled them to hit a window that nobody thought was possible to hit, and they just had dollar signs in their eyes, and it was just amazing. Everything came together. So it felt really good. And then you get into December, and now in December, you look at the sales charts and things like that, and E.T. and Raiders of the Lost both top the sales charts at that Christmas. I have 2 games in the top 10 of all video games. So I'm feeling pretty good about that because we haven't had much feedback yet. Because it was mostly going out at Christmas present, nobody was really opening up and playing it yet. Everybody was and putting it under the tree and saving it for then came and everybody opened it up, and a lot of people threw it away, and a lot of people got really upset, and but we didn't hear about it right away. Okay, because also there wasn't much media. There were just a few magazines. You didn't have the social media connection where wildfire spreads. And so, but as it got into the next year in '83, feedback really started to come back and returns started to go. I have to say that people say that ET is a horrible game, but the truth is, even after accounting for all the returns, it still sold over 1.5 million copies. In fact, I think I'm the only programmer at Atari whose every game they released was 1 million sellers. I'm very proud of that. And E.T. did not break that record, I'm happy to say. But there was a lot of disappointment around E.T. And as the word started to come back, and I would hear more and more.
And
yeah,
and I'm like, so I tried playing ET for the first time, and I wanted to play it raw, like blind. And at first, if I was a kid back in the 80s, you know, if I'm the 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid playing this game for the first time, I'm like, okay, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Why do I keep falling?
Same.
Why do I keep falling under these pits? And
Me too.
I'm like,
well, Jonas,
So,
that's
well,
a great
obvi-
point. That's a great point.
well, obviously there's
Because
a
there's a
manual,
rule in
but
video games.
nobody wanted to read the manual back in the day. so
Right.
I
You
had
see, there
to
was a rule in
watch a
video
few
games,
videos
which
about it.
was-
Yeah.
Sorry, please proceed, Howard.
But
Go
there
ahead.
weren't web videos. No, that's okay. There weren't
Yeah.
web videos
That's
back then
right.
either, right? So you couldn't even get hints online because there was no online. So your point is well. I mean, there was a saying at Atari that said everything. It's called Nolan Bushnell's law, which is that a video game should be easy to learn and tough to master. Okay,
Easy to
people
learn
don't
and hard to
realize that it
master.
takes time and effort to make something easy to learn and tough to master. Right. So I tended to make games that were hard to learn and hard to master because if you expect a little more from the player in terms of learning to work the game, you can deliver a much deeper and a much more involved game. But Jonas, you're absolutely right in that people don't want to read the manual because all the information was there in the manual, and you had two schools of people. You had people who read the manual who enjoyed the game and thought it was cool, and people who didn't read the manual couldn't figure out what the heck is going on and it's not making any sense, and they were upset. And they're all correct. They're all right. I never tell a player you're wrong with your opinion of the game or it was. It's okay. I mean, it's a choice I made. It's also expedient because I didn't have much time. Making something, it's easy to make something complicated, right? Making something simple takes more time. It's like it was Mark Twain or someone who said, if I had more time, I'd write you a shorter letter, because
Yes.
to edit things and review them and put things together, that takes time that I didn't have. So, like I say, sometimes it's kind of think about it, is one of the problems with ET was that I ended up releasing a game that was virtually 100% of my concept, my initial concept. And that's a horrible, horrible thing because in a good development, you 100% of your concept. What happens is as you're working through the development, your concept changes and it gets better and you improve things and you things out you didn't know initially. So the initial concept, your final should only be like 15-20% of that because the rest should be better. The problem with ET was it was 100% of my initial concept and never had the chance to improve on that. And so that was kind of a shame. But as the word came back and I started to get the negative opinions and stuff, I was ready. Me, this is like 6 months, 7 months after I finished the game. I'm already deeply involved in my next developments and things like that. So, I don't, what's behind me is not quite as important as it started to carry on into the 90s. So then the internet did come out in the 90s. And one of the greatest things they would do when the internet first started is top 10 lists, right? Everybody likes to do lists. It's easy to
That's true.
compile and it's great to vote on it. And ET would be at the top of a lot of the worst game lists, and then that's when the wave really started with, oh, what a horrible game it is! It's the worst game of all time, and so, but me being who I am, I always see the funny side of things. I really think humor is a very important piece of life, and if you lose sight of what's funny about something, what else are you missing? That's a question I always pose. So I always found
Amen.
amusing ways to deal with it, and I came up with clever things to say about it, because I'm essentially a happy person. And ET did not destroy my happiness. It might have hurt my career, but not destroy my happiness. And the truth is, ET has always felt to me like a success, right? Because I did the fastest game of all time. Like I said earlier, I don't really believe, I agree with Joel. I don't think it's the worst game of all time. There are worse games than ET, but I like it better when people say ET is the worst because yours is also the best. And I
Yeah.
like range.
Not really the worst, but as long as you know what you're doing, I think it's playable. It's enjoyable in its own right.
Hmm. The way it is, actually, I played through it a number of times, and I can tell you, Howard, that my wife is very proud of the fact that she played ET when it first came out, and she finished it all on her own without any help from anybody. She figured it out
Legend.
all on her own, and it's one of the things that she holds over me as a gamer. She's my wife is a gamer as well. She plays video games a lot. We're of the same age, and that's one of the things that keeps us connected, and it's one of the things that she
Wow.
holds over me all the time, the fact that she finished ET without anybody's help.
Without any help.
And I have to give her that. So
Respect.
yes, but to bring it all in, let me just acknowledge the fact that Howard is
Well, let me,
oh, continue, Howard, please.
let me just jump in here for 1 second. I want to just say that as a game maker, I am super impressed that your wife was able to just intuit and get through the whole game and win it on her own. That's fantastic. As a marriage and family therapist, I'd say don't let that woman go.
I
She's a
have
keeper.
I have
She is a
absolutely
keeper.
no intention. When my marriage vow is till death do us part, I completely plan on fulfilling that to the very end. But yes, to bring it all in though.
Not soon, I hope.
Okay, not soon, not soon. Let's hope not. Okay. Now
Or
to bring it all in, Howard is I mentioned that Howard is one of the foundational pillars of video gaming as we know it today. Like Howard mentioned in his book and in this interview, in his book Once Upon a Atari by Howard Scott Warshaw, available
Mhm.
in all great bookstores all over right now, like Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and on his website, onceuponatari.com. Again, onceuponatari.com. Howard is one of the foundational pillars of video gaming as we know it today. Quick rundown: Howard is the initial conceptualizer of gaming backstories. So if you are at all knowledgeable of who Solid Snake is, or who Master Chief is, or who Nathan Drake of the Uncharted series is, the guy who started all of that is right here with us, Howard Scott Warshaw, also an amazing programmer that actually shows how much he was able to do with such limited time and resources. Honestly, again, I am of the mind that everything that Howard did back then was completely amazing. If anybody here is at all curious about the history of technology and video games in particular, highly recommended you check out Howard Scott Warshaw's website, Once Upon Atari. Check out the documentary Once Upon Atari and his book Once Upon Atari by Howard Scott Warshaw. Now, I want to give it back to Howard for one more time because I certainly don't want to take up too much of his valuable time. I know he's got lots to do, and he's he's the Valley psychotherapist right now. We don't want we don't want to take up too much of his time. But again, please, Howard, give us some of your thoughts about how things were after Atari and how things are in general in terms of the video game landscape, shall we say, and how your actions have impacted video gaming to today. Howard?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah,
We'll
no
try to narrow
problem.
it down.
So, no, that's fine. That's fine. What I would say is that I am honored to have been one of the pioneers and only one of many pioneers launching video games. I'm super proud to have done some foundational things that really have become standards and pillars, like you're saying, of the industry. I don't really think of myself as a pillar because I'm usually not that stiff, but I do think that when you look at gaming now, what you see is there's tremendous. First, there was the move 2D to 3D, and now we're going from 3D to virtual reality. Uh, Gaming today, I always advocate for creativity, and what's about the whole situation with gaming is that gaming has kind of come full circle in a way. In that originally it was just one screen things on a very simple system, just people playing, and you just play your game and there you go. And console games grew and grew and grew. And they got to the point where they were so big, no one person could do one. It takes huge teams to create a console game. And when you have large teams needed to do anything, you get inertia. You have trouble shifting momentum and you lose flexibility. And you see it there's narrow casting, right? If you look at console games, there are not that many different genres. There's your basic games, and that's what people make, and they keep redoing those games over and over. What I like is innovative gameplay and new ideas, and that's harder to come by as time goes on. It's so expensive to make a video game now, a console game, that people don't want to take a chance, they don't want to take a risk, and that suffers, and innovation suffers in that environment. But when I say it came full circle, because in addition to giant console games that we have now, we also have handheld games. Now you can play on your phone, you can play on small devices, and one person can still write an app to make a new game, a fresh gameplay. And so the idea that a small group of people or one person can just experiment and play with new types of game mechanics, that's super exciting to me, because if there's one thing I felt I brought to video games, it was fresh perspective and the idea of always expanding horizons. And that's what was really important to me. That's what is going to remain important in the industry. The video game industry is generating technologies that are very important to everything that we do. And people talk about VR, virtual reality. I think augmented reality, or AR, is actually going to be the great contribution of video gaming that's going to really
Uh,
change people's lives. But the real thing that I hope, if there's anything that I brought to gaming and I promote forever and hope always maintains, is pure creativity, is the idea of trying something new, find the new way to go, inspiration. That's what I'm all about as a therapist, and that's what I'm all about as a game designer, and that's what I hope becomes my legacy in the industry. And Joel and everybody, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's great to talk to all of you.
my
Yes.
My goodness, Howard. We're the ones who are actually
Yeah,
very
we're
honored that you've decided to grace
yeah.
us with your presence. It is completely amazing for us that you have taken a little bit of your time and decided to share your experiences with us, not just with
Mhm.
analysts here in Timeless Gamer, part of Pinoy Retro Gaming, but also our audience worldwide, because we are trying to communicate to not just our generation, but also to the generations that are coming up nowadays, who are video gamers and who play the games but might not have a good understanding of how everything started. Honestly, it's an amazing, amazing trip. If anybody is at all interested in reading on history, check out Howard Scott Warshaw's book, Once Upon Atari, available in good bookstores and all books and bookstores, and his website, onceuponatari.com. I'll give it to Jonas for the final fight for the
I,
final
actually,
message.
I
Oh wait,
have a one quick question.
Mahmoud, you might have one really quick question then.
Yeah. Um.
No problem.
I, yeah. Thanks, Howard. My last question is in regards to the sequel for Your Revenge. Were you aware of that? And if you are, how did you feel about those people basically recreating your game, remixing things around to make it a little bit different, but it's basically still Yours Revenge?
Shin, I got to tell you, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I wasn't crazy about it, because people have done variants of Yar's Revenge and they didn't consult me about it, and
Yeah.
that wouldn't bother me of itself, except a lot of times what didn't really enhance or improve or flow with the ethic, the basic aesthetic of Yar's Revenge, to me is very specific. But I
Yeah.
will announce here, and this word is only beginning to get out, that
Yes.
I am actually looking at creating a Yar's Revenge sequel. People always ask me, hey, could you redo ET? Would you fix ET if you would do another game? And I always say, you know what? If I were going to do another game, not being ET, I'm going to do something you haven't seen before. I've had a
Oh my
design in
god.
my head for a Yar's Revenge sequel for like over 30 years. I've still never seen it done anywhere. It's a beautiful gameplay. It's well tailored to the 2600. It would be a frenetic, fast action gameplay with exciting visuals, lots of eye
Uh-huh.
popping, ear popping action going on. I think I'm finally going to do this game. So I'm going to find a way to do it, whether I do it with Atari or without Atari. I'm going to make this thing come true, because people have done other Yars products. No one has ever really done what I would consider to be a wild Yars or
Yeah.
sequel. I'm going to do it. So
Awesome.
Excellent.
there it is.
Yeah.
Your audience, you're the first ones to know.
Sweet. Yeah.
So,
Nice.
and if you need,
Yeah. Yeah.
if if you need a good Christmas present to help fund my development of next game, as was
Nice.
saying, Once Upon Atari, How I Made History by Killing an Industry, and the Once Upon Atari DVD, which is all the actual game programmers and developers telling their stories of what happened at Atari, which was amazing.
Mhm.
And, onceuponatari.com is the place for your late Christmas shopping because you can get the legacy that keeps on giving.
Excellent.
Sweet. I'm
Wonderful,
looking forward
wonderful,
for that.
wonderful.
Awesome.
There you go. Again, ladies and gentlemen, onceuponatari.com, the website where you can get the Once Upon Atari documentary on DVD or Howard Scott Warshaw's book, Once Upon Atari, which chronicles how he made history by killing an industry. All right, final thoughts, final comments from our master of ceremonies, Jonas. Joe, take it away.
All right. So there you have it, guys. So Once Upon Atari is now available on Howard's website. So that's Once Upon Atari. I think the website now is called New Once Upon Atari dot hswarshaw.com. Just Google that, guys, and then I'm showing you guys uh, the homepage right now. And for a limited time only, you can get the Once Upon a Atari set, which includes the book and the DVD documentary series, both signed by Howard Scott Warshaw himself, all for a good price of $54.95 US dollars. Now, I already corresponded with Howard with my copy of this particular bundle. Um, it's a little bit costly sending it to Australia, but hey, guys, it is worth it. All right. So, Once Upon a Time, guys, get it, especially this coming Christmas. Um, all retro, all retro gamers should at least have at least the book, or why not get both, right?
Yes.
So I'm gonna give it again to Howard to give thanks to, and he wants to shout out some of the people who are watching us live and listening to us live at the very moment. Howard, all back to
I just
you.
want to say thank you all again for having me on. My wife will not forgive me if I don't, mention the fact that, that at our website, I will personally autograph copy for you. If you order through my website at atari.com, I will actually write out an autograph that's personalized for you. I'm happy to do it. I just want to appreciate all the people. Making video games doesn't mean anything without players, without fans, without people who are into it. I have been so fortunate, so blessed in my life to have been able to provide entertainment for people and to have them really appreciate it and enjoy it. And spending time with the people who appreciate and enjoy classic video games, it's always a pleasure. So once again, I just thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Do it again sometime if you guys
Heck,
are up
we
for
might
it.
We
Just
will
we
really
might
hope
actually
Oh,
that.
oh,
hear about
we
that
want to wish you
we're
one.
gonna be so honored if you're gonna drop by and if you give us a bit of a hint when's the new Yars Revenge remake will gonna come
yes.
out.
And
We're gonna be looking
honestly,
forward for that.
especially considering the fact that Howard has this book which has so many stories. Honestly, it's not just for retro video gamers. It's not just for gamers in general. It's also for historians. It's also for programmers in general. It's also for
Yes.
anybody who's all interested in technology and how marketing ties into technology and how they work together and sometimes how they conflict. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Howard Scott Warshaw of Once Upon Atari. Thank you very much,
Such
Howard,
an
for
honor.
being here. We are so grateful for the
Thank
time,
you so
and
much. Thank you so
and we are
much.
extremely thankful. We look forward to having you again sometime in the near future if you're at all interested in telling us a little bit more about the stories that you have
Yes.
about the days. And again, this Howard Scott Warshaw is the Silicon Valley psychotherapist. You can check out his practice also on through his website on onceuponatari.com. Jonas, take us away.
All right. And there you have it, guys. So we don't want to keep Sir Howard here. I keep calling him Sir. I'm so polite. Well, anyways, so to all of you
Well,
guys,
no objection
um,
here. Thank you all so much.
so to all of you guys who stayed from the very beginning of this interview, thank you so much for being here. And as always, guys, our video games and our bodies may go out of date, but our video game experiences will forever remain
Timeless.
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 Bye bye,
Thank you very
guys.
much,
Bye.
everybody. God bless.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.